Imagine waking up one morning to discover that you spent the entire night wrestling with God. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? But that's exactly what happened to Jacob, one of the most intriguing figures of the Old Testament. Welcome to another video on our channel. Today, we're diving into the fascinating story of the man who literally wrestled with God and lived to tell the tale. This story isn't just an ancient tale. It carries profound lessons about perseverance, transformation, and the nature of our relationship with God. Get ready for a journey through one of the most mysterious and inspiring passages in the Bible. Before we get into the epic struggle, we need to understand who Jacob was. Born as the second son of Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob was the younger twin of Esau. From the womb, the narrative tells us there was rivalry between the brothers. Jacob, whose name means he who grasps the heel, or he who supplants, lived up to his name from the start. Jacob was someone who sought to replace or take the place of others, especially his brother. This introduction to his character helps us contextualize the events that follow. Jacob's life was marked by deceit and manipulation. He tricked his brother Esau, stealing his birthright for a bowl of lentils, and later, with his mother's help, deceived his blind father to receive the blessing meant for the firstborn. These actions shaped Jacob's character and set the stage for his future transformation. It's important to note how the Bible doesn't hide the flaws of its characters, making them more human and relatable. Years passed, and Jacob built his own family and wealth far from home, working for his uncle Laban. Now, he was returning to his homeland, fearing the encounter with his brother Esau. The night before this meeting would set the stage for the most extraordinary event of his life. We can imagine the anxiety and fear Jacob must have felt at that moment. Let's get to the main point of our story: Jacob's wrestling with God. The biblical narrative tells us that on the night before his encounter with Esau, Jacob was left alone. Suddenly, a man appeared and began to wrestle with him until daybreak. This was no ordinary fight. It was a supernatural encounter that would change Jacob forever. The physical struggle described in the Bible is intriguing. Imagine the scene: the darkness of the night, the sound of wrestling, two opponents locked in a combat that lasted hours. This vivid description invites us to reflect. What does this struggle represent on a deeper level? Many scholars see this as a representation of Jacob's spiritual and emotional struggle. As the wrestling continues, we realize that Jacob's opponent is no ordinary man. The strength and endurance demonstrated are superhuman. This man is later identified as a divine manifestation, possibly an angel or God himself in human form. This revelation adds a layer of depth and mystery to the narrative. A crucial moment occurs when Jacob's opponent, seeing that he could not overpower him, touches Jacob's hip, dislocating it. Even injured, Jacob refuses to let go of his opponent. He demands a blessing before releasing him. The opponent then asks Jacob his name. By answering, Jacob is not just identifying himself, he is acknowledging his nature as a supplanter. This moment of honesty and vulnerability is key to his transformation. It is at this point that the most significant transformation occurs. The opponent says, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome." This name change is deeply symbolic in biblical tradition, representing a shift in identity and destiny. The name Israel means he who struggles with God, or God fights. This new identity reflects not only Jacob's experience that night, but also the role he and his descendants would play in biblical history. After receiving his new name, Jacob asks his opponent's name. Curiously, he doesn't get a direct answer, but instead receives a blessing. This detail adds an element of mystery to the narrative and reminds us of the limits of our understanding of the divine. Some questions may remain unanswered, but the blessing endures. Jacob then names the place Peniel, which means face of God, saying, "I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." This name captures the intensity and intimacy of the encounter. The idea of seeing God face to face was considered dangerous in Hebrew tradition, making Jacob's survival even more remarkable. As the sun rises over a field, symbolizing a new day for Jacob, the narrative tells us that Jacob leaves that place limping because of his hip injury. Jacob's limping is significant. It shows that transformative encounters with God can leave us marked. These marks are not necessarily negative. They can be reminders of our spiritual journey and the lessons we have learned along the way. But the story doesn't end with the struggle. The next chapter in the Bible narrates Jacob's meeting with Esau. We see a transformed Jacob, humble and seeking reconciliation. His struggle with God prepared him to face his past and seek healing in his human relationships. This narrative raises fascinating questions about the nature of our relationship with God. It suggests that it is acceptable, even expected, to struggle in our faith journey. Questioning, doubting, and even wrestling with God can be part of the process of spiritual growth. Jacob's story also teaches us about personal transformation. We see how a profound encounter with God can fundamentally change who we are. Jacob entered the struggle as a man defined by his deceit and emerged as Israel, the father of a nation. Reflect for a moment on your own spiritual journey. Have there been times when you felt like you were wrestling with God? How have these experiences shaped your faith and character? Jacob's persistence in seeking a blessing is another inspiring aspect of this story. It reminds us of the importance of perseverance in our spiritual lives. Sometimes, the deepest blessings come after periods of intense struggle and persistence. It's interesting to see how this story fits into the larger context of the biblical narrative. Jacob, now Israel, becomes the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. His struggle and transformation didn't just impact his personal life, but had implications for future generations. Jacob's vulnerability during this encounter is also notable. He was alone, it was night, and he was about to face a past he feared. Often, it's in these moments of vulnerability that we experience the deepest encounters with God. The story of Jacob wrestling with God is a powerful reminder that our spiritual journey can involve struggle, but also profound transformation. It encourages us to persevere in our search for God, even when it's difficult. May we, like Jacob, have the courage to face our spiritual struggles and come out transformed. Let us be willing to wrestle for our blessing, knowing that an encounter with God can fundamentally change who we are. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through one of the Bible's most intriguing stories. If you felt touched or inspired by this narrative, please leave a comment sharing your reflections or personal experiences. Your perspective might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming videos exploring the rich stories and lessons of the Bible. Your support helps us continue producing content that inspires and uplifts. And stay tuned, because our next video, which is appearing on the screen now, promises to be just as fascinating. May God bless you all.